In this video, you'll learn how to define the structure of a web page for the JProp shop. This HTML file contains tags that define the basic structure of an HTML document. The doc type statement indicates the markup language of the document. The head element provides information and instructions to the browser about the document. In this case, the head element contains a comment describing the document, identifying the author, and noting the date the document was created. These characters mark the beginning and end of the comment. The contents of the title element appear in the browser's title bar or page tab. The body element will contain the content of the page, including text and graphics. When you display this web page in a browser, such as Internet Explorer, it contains only the document title in the Browser tab. The page itself is empty because no content has been added to the body element yet. Before you start coding the body section, it's a good idea to plan the entire web page to identify potential problems. The web page for the JProp shop is based on this flyer. It contains several elements common to many web pages, including a header section which displays the company's logo. The footer section displays contact information for the JProp shop. The main section describes the business and is organized into subsections known as articles. The sidebar section containing customer comments is called an aside. You can mark each part of the HTML file for this web page using HTML5 structural elements, which are the elements that define the major sections of a web page. For example, to mark the header of the web page, you insert a header element in the page body using the syntax shown here. In the syntax, header content is the page content you want to display in the page header. You define structural elements in a web page so you can write styles for them and determine their appearance on a web page. Browsers do not provide default styles to display these elements. To insert the HTML5 structural elements in the HTML file for the JProp shop's web page, open the jprop.htm file in a text editor, and then add the 4 tags shown here within the body element. You are already familiar with the header element, which includes content that appears at the top of the page. The section element contains the major topics on the page. The aside element contains side issues to the main topic of the page. The footer element includes content that appears at the bottom of the page. You can also nest structural elements within one another. For example, for this web page, you can nest 3 article elements within the section element. This code creates 3 article areas within the large section area. A common mistake with HTML5 structural elements is mistyping an element name. For example, suppose while adding the content for this page, you type sections in the tags instead of section. The page is no longer formatted the same way because no style is associated with the sections tag. You can restore the formatting by correcting the typing error in the section element name. The header, section, article, aside, and footer structural elements are new to HTML5. HTML5 also uses the nav element, which contains a navigation list of hypertext links. In short, the 6 HTML5 structural elements are article, aside, footer, header, nav, and section. These elements are not part of HTML 4.01 or XHTML. Pages written in those languages use the div element to identify page divisions. The div element uses the syntax shown here. In the syntax, the ID attribute is a unique name assigned to the division, and content is page content within that division. For example, the code in this diagram uses header as the ID attribute. The content could be a graphic or text that appears at the top of the page. The ID attribute is not required, nor does HTML4 have a standard list of ID names, so different authors can and do use different ID names. Using the ID attribute to distinguish one div element from another is helpful if you want to apply different styles to each page division. For example, the header division shown here uses the default style, while the nav division uses a font different from the default. You can use either HTML5's structural elements or HTML 4.01's div elements to identify the major sections of your document. Which one should you use? The HTML5 approach is preferred because it represents the future standard of the web. Structural element names are also more descriptive than the generic div element. The div element doesn't use any rules for ID names, so one developer might use header for the page heading, while another might use top. Using varying names makes it harder for web search engines to identify the main topics of interest in each web page. Web search engines don't have this problem with HTML5 code, so they correctly identify the content of your web pages. Now you know how to define the structure of a web page by using the HTML5 structural elements and the HTML 4.01 div element.